Hello and welcome to Ukraine Today. My name is Sam Kearley and I am joined here in our newsroom by French military and firearms expert Edmond Huet. Welcome to the programme.
Bonjour.
I understand you're working for a non-governmental organisation, Strata Forum. What is Strata Forum doing in Ukraine?
Strata Forum is trying to inform the people in English language. There are not many sources. I began to be involved 1.5 years ago when it started on Maidan. The movement started on Maidan, and I wanted to inform people. So I had a personal interest, having discovered Ukraine a few years ago and Russia a few years ago. And I participated at the beginning with Euromaidan press. I had the surprise to see some equipments and ammunitions that were supposed not to have been employed by Yanukovych Berkuts at that moment, and I took some contact with people here in Ukraine, and that's how I began to be involved in analyzing and being submitted some documents or other pieces to give my advice as a firearm expert. I found out that, for example, some lethal ammunition had been used. It was visible first on video because of the muzzle brake and the muzzle flash, the muzzle jam we could see on the video. And later, the first people killed on Maidan, it was found out that they were killed by some 12-gauge caliber projectiles that were designed by and manufactured by a small company in Kiev, working exclusively for the Ministry of Internal Affairs. And these projectiles were designed to break engine blocks on cars when they try to force a roadblock. And so Yanukovych administration pretended not to be using live ammunition, not to be using hunting calibers, but this type of ammunition can be used either it's a 12-gauge in a shotgun side by side, the traditional hunting shotgun, or the police riot gun, the pump gun. So that's how it began. Then later I got involved with the context I had with Euromaidan more and more. They asked me to analyze events, and I was involved in the discovery of the origin of the little green men. And for example, using open sources like VKontakte, the Russian Facebook, it was easy to find out. At that moment, there were thousands of profiles of people showing their presence, like some say, on holidays in Crimea and later in eastern Ukraine. Around 10,000 profiles have been removed from VKontakte. And it was very easy to identify some of them because of all the selfies and the bodies who took pictures. And for example, some of them on their tactical load-bearing vest were wearing a kind of sticker with the name. So you just have to zoom on it, you got the name of the guy, and you just have to go to his profile. That's how I found out. Then about the weapons. Some weapons, some vehicles were used exclusively by the Russian Federation armed forces, and so it was easy to know they were Russians before it was official, if I dare to say. And then I was involved too with the MH17. At that moment I was in front, but still in contact with people of Euromaidan. We had so many followers, thousands of followers, that at the moment I was live on BFM TV, the French business TV, interview to try to guess what happened, to know what happened to the MH17. At the moment I left home, before going to the studio, I had information about the way the book launcher was going back to the Russian border. What has been demonstrated later by many people taking pictures and posting them on social networks, YouTube videos showing the book launcher dissimulated in the shadow of a building near a gas station or taken from a government housing on the road with one cover on it, but clearly one shape that showed that one missile was missing. And later, the French Paris Match journalist got a real scoop because they had followed the civilian flatbed trailer that took back the book launcher to Russia. It was clearly identified. It had been stolen by the so-called separatists in Donbas from a transport company, a shipping company. The advertising logos were still on it. The book was on it, and the journalist followed him until the border. And later, some people used videos from their dashboard cameras to show the book in Russia. So already, less than 48 hours after this murder happened, we had all the evidences Russia was involved, from open sources, from journalists doing their work, from people posting dashboard videos.
In the last few days, the Canadian Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, has called on Russian President Vladimir Putin to end his invasion of Ukraine. So why has it taken so long for the West to wake up and call the invasion what it is, an invasion?
I think pretending there is no war, that there is no invasion, the West is trying to avoid a war, simply. It seems the Canadians have really early started to speak the truth, and now that the rest of the world is admitting, more or less, openly, officially, that there is a war, that there is an invasion, that Russians are in eastern Ukraine since last summer. It seems people are starting to speak, and my opinion is that we are seeing a race to the big one, like exactly the Second World War. We are exactly living what happened. We can understand it, but now we cannot say, I didn't know.
Recently, you wrote an article which stated that Ukraine today manufactures some of the best anti-tank weapons in the world. You said Ukraine were the spearhead army of the Warsaw Pact, and even after the collapse of the USSR, the Ukraine remained the strongest military in Eastern Europe. So, in your opinion, what went wrong?
What went wrong is, of course, the corruption of various regimes that followed the independence. When I was a French soldier in the French forces or Germany, probably Ukraine was the most formidable armed forces were to face. The first army of Ukraine was part of a Soviet group, and we knew exactly what they had. Can you imagine at that moment, just before even before the independence, there were 1 million people serving in Ukraine, active soldiers in the armed forces, including all those people who had been trained, who got through the military service, those military preparation organization, and the law enforcement units. There were 5 million people able to fight in Ukraine, and there were enough equipments, vehicles, armaments, and ammunition to equip them for 6 months of continental war. And it was only in 1991. Ammunition were stolen to resell the scrap metals, to use the propellant, the powder, that is an organic compound that is a very good fertilizer. And they were stolen in the middle of the pile. I discovered many things when investigating by professional interest, that they were stolen in the middle of the pile, and so a simple inventory could not show what was missing. But when there was a more thorough inventory, which included testing of ammunition to see their shape and if they were still usable. At that moment, there was a fire in some ammunition-filled depot, and it exploded. Or can you check how many millions of rounds exploded? You can't. What went wrong is, for example, one example, there were some dozens of helicopters, brand new, that disappeared. They were officially sent to Africa for demonstration, never arrived in Africa, never came back to Ukraine. Brand new combat helicopters, where are they? Another problem is what has been stolen by the separatists during the time. We could see on video, again in open source, when they took full trailers of manpads, portable missiles for air defense, and anti-tank weapons. All that is missing today.
Edmond, that is all we have time for. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
You have been watching Ukraine Today with French military and firearms expert Edmond Huet. Now we return to the news.